Welcome to Unexpected Points. I'm your host, Kevin Cole. I'm joined today by Stephen Holder. He covers the Colts for The Athletic. He's been covering them since 2013, so he's got tenure probably over some of his colleagues there covering the Colts. And what I really wanted to talk with you about today, Stephen, is not just the Wentz trade. Obviously, that is the topical thing, and we'll get to that. But I've been really interested in this organization, in particular since Ballard has gotten there. And I think you've reported on this a couple of times, how they, not only in the front office, but with coaching, have been very, what we would call maybe analytics friendly. And, some teams are maybe analytics curious. They've gone a little bit further, I'd say, and they're actually implementing some of this stuff, and you've written about it. So we're a nerd-friendly podcast here. So I want to talk about some of that stuff and then feed it into more of the football stuff and their plan going forward. So thank you for joining me.
Yeah, hey, thanks for having me.
And I also appreciate a great follow on Twitter. It's at Holder Steven, is that right?
Yeah,
great follow on Twitter.
I think Stephen Holder was taken or something. I don't know. It's been a long time. But
yeah, I feel like Twitter needs to have some sort of method where if you have a higher follower count, you can claim, like you could claim whatever that is. So there's probably some guy with Stephen Holder out there with like 7 followers who's never used it before. But I'll say good follow on Twitter, and not only in the written stuff, but I think I appreciate not only the analysis that you have, but I appreciate somewhat of a level like mindset when these things come here, because this is a franchise that now we're going on, I guess, 4 straight seasons where I guess Jacoby Brissett was a quarterback in a couple of those different seasons, but you went from Brissett to Luck to Brissett to Rivers to Wentz. I mean, it's kind of been all over the place, and the emotions and the expectations, I would say, from fans have also kind of really, really big undulations there where you've tried to keep a level mindset there. So maybe just start now, before we get into the historical stuff, with the state of the franchise here. What is your opinion on the state of the franchise as far as how hopeful you are going forward? And more importantly, what do you think the fans are thinking right now? Because I know they were very high, maybe a little bit too high in that Jacoby Brissett season when he took over before Rivers got there, maybe a little too low going into that season. How do you see things right now?
Yeah, a lot of big swings for sure.
Yeah.
It's been, look, they're now going to have, I think, changed quarterbacks in 4 straight seasons, which is just insane. Even the worst teams in the NFL probably don't go through that, so it really is a unique situation. There's no doubt. I think the fans mostly get it. I think people who went through the Peyton Manning era understand that's not what this is, and clearly. And so, I tell people all the time, for a period of about 20 years, they had mostly 2 quarterbacks. Peyton Manning and Andrew Luck, and it was really good. So, you had 2 elite quarterbacks, one of them in the Hall of Fame, for a period of 20 years. I mean, that's like striking gold, and just doesn't happen. And even owner Jim Irsay has admitted that, like, all right, I'm pretty lucky. Yeah, you're lucky. No question about it. So anyway, like I said, a lot of transition lately. Going to change quarterbacks again, 4th year in a row, as I said. And, but I think that people want to be hopeful and want to think that there's reason for optimism, because they can look at the roster, as anybody can, and say, all right, well, that guy's really good. That guy's really good. They have more depth than they've had probably in a lot of years. They definitely have, like, look at defense. They have talent at every single level of that defense. You cannot deny that there are studs at every level of the defense, some better than others, but they're there. On offense, right? You have the makings of what you need to have a great offense. You have a great elite offensive line. You have what looks like a fantastic young running back. You have, I think, some wide receiver potential there as well. A guy like Michael Pittman, who might have number 1 wide receiver stuff. We'll see. But the quarterback, and so here we are. It's a really rare situation. I've been around the NFL a long time, and I don't know that I've ever seen a situation where I was around a team that was this prepared to compete, yet had no answers at quarterback. It's usually the other way around. You have this really good quarterback. It's Matthew Stafford and the Lions. Those situations can happen because at the end of the day, the quarterback's still just one guy. But here, I think you have the opposite. You generally spend so much time looking for the quarterback that you end up ignoring the other stuff. Here, they had the quarterback, they thought, and they did a good job of accumulating the other talent, and then the quarterback retired. So and by retired, I mean Andrew Luck, not the other quarterback who retired, Philip Rivers. So
Yeah, you got multiple retirements here.
right. I told Frank Reich recently, I was like, maybe it's you. People keep retiring. So anyway, but he actually did laugh. I'm glad he laughed because I wasn't sure if he was going to find that funny. So anyway, that's kind of how I see the team, and I think, as I said, I think most fans understand that. But patience is also fleeting, So at some point, people are going to. I think they're already there almost. A lot of people are getting there. Like, you know what? All right, enough. We can't use that excuse forever. And they're right. You got to win. And I think Chris Ballard and Frank Reich feel that pressure. Not that they're getting fired, but I think they're impatient because they're competitors, and they should be that. They should feel that way.
Yeah. I mean, it really is flipping from one end of the extreme to another. I mean, you mentioned Peyton Manning, Andrew Luck. If you were, I think, objectively going to say who, maybe Trevor Lawrence is the next guy in this generational quarterback draft pick, number 1 overall pick. The Colts happened to get 2 in a row, basically, in that regard. And they, building around the quarterback was difficulty. And that kind of gives you a good floor. Now, you admit, rarely do you see these teams who seem to have a very strong floor, as the Colts do, without having the quarterback. So, again, I want to kind of go back in time a little bit here. So Ballard comes in 2017, right?
Correct.
Reich comes in 2018. And I think a reason that I started really paying attention to what Chris Ballard was doing is he was doing a lot of the kind of standard, analytics types of moves when it comes to the draft. He was trading back, right? I mean, there was opportunity there to trade back from the Sam Darnold pick and pick up a few extra second-round picks. He traded back from the first round into the second round, where I think Washington traded up in that one. He held a lot of powder as far as cap space was concerned, and now it's flipped around. So I guess going back and looking back in time here, the best result that the Colts had during this stretch was that 2018 season, making it to the divisional round. Again, like I said, they were trading back, so they had, they weren't exactly pushing forward in that regard. They had $50 million in cap space. Was it possible that Ballard was being too conservative during that point in time? Because some people were pointing to that. I like the patient approach. Obviously, he didn't know that Andrew Luck was going to retire, but even if you don't blame him for that, should he have been trying to maximize that time at that point here? Because I go back and forth on that question.
Yeah, so I think in hindsight, it's a fair question, but I also understand. I can see where he was coming from, right? So, and what I mean by that is, 2017, they go 4-12. Andrew Luck doesn't play, and so in 2018, I don't think they knew what they were. I don't think they knew, for example, right, that Darius Leonard was going to come on the scene and be the player that he was and help transform that defense. I don't think they knew what Matt Eberflus's immediate impact would be as the defensive coordinator. I think that was one of his really masterful jobs, I thought, so far in his 3 seasons. A really young defense, and to get those guys to play as big as they did. I think you also didn't know what Andrew Luck was going to be, because I think if you watch the first few games of 2018, he's not the same guy as the guy you saw in the postseason that year, or toward the end, where they won 9 out of 10. He was still working his way back, and I think, remember, he didn't line up with that team until the first day of training camp, even. So there were a lot of uncertainties there. So I think they were still in a mindset of rebuilding to some extent. They had Andrew Luck, and with Andrew Luck, a quarterback at that level, maybe you're never really rebuilding. But they didn't know what they had. I think we saw the potential for some of those young guys, but there were a lot of young guys. I mean, I think I gotta believe over half their team was probably on rookie contract. You know what I mean? It was really unique, that situation. So, to then, go all in and go big in free agency and maybe tie yourself down for a couple of years and lose some flexibility for a couple of years. I think that would have been something that Chris Ballard would have been reluctant to do. He was reluctant to do and did not do it. And I understand why, because again, we need to figure out what we are, a new coach, all those things, right? I mean, I just don't think there was any reason to assume they were going to be a team that could go on a run. I thought they could be good, but that was mostly based on the fact that I was assuming Andrew Luck would play well. But I mean, that's it. That was really all I was going on. I was like, all right, the offensive line looks good, but I mean, we didn't know Braden Smith could play right tackle. All these little things. We didn't know what that team was, and I think that's true for us, me, you, and also Chris Ballard at that time. So they developed a lot quicker than anyone envisioned, and then that's why it was such a blow, obviously, when Andrew Luck retired a year from then, a year forward from then, because that team, then they did know. Then it was like, all right, you know what? Why can't we be in the AFC Championship game? And I think all of those thoughts were very reasonable. So yeah, I don't blame Ballard for that. I think, again, totally fair question, but I think they needed to find out what they were in 2018, and as it turned out, they were pleasantly surprised that, damn, we're pretty good.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it is amazing how much a single offseason, a single draft class can make a difference. I
Yeah.
mean, I'd say that 2018 draft class. I mean, also Quentin Nelson, right? Earlier, and then bringing in Darius Leonard and others. It's maybe a little bit analogous to like the 2017 Saints draft class, where they got Marshawn Lattimore and Alvin Kamara and all those guys, and really took a next step there. Yeah, hard to predict that something like that was going to happen, but now with knowing that Brissett is going to take over, knowing that Andrew Luck is out, there are a few moves that were criticized. And in retrospect, maybe you could say, I mean, number one was maybe giving Brissett a little bit more money than what whatever his fair value, quote unquote fair value, whatever you want to say. There was kind of a show of faith of giving him that. So maybe there's that there. Should they have been more aggressive trying to just get a quarterback? They didn't have the ability in the draft to do that. Although last year, maybe if they don't make the DeForest Buckner trade, they can move up, something like that. Those sorts of ideas. Do you think they've been doing enough to address the position, and then left at the point they are now with Wentz? And we'll talk about this quite a bit going forward. It's a risky move, right? So this is not a move that necessarily would be a 1A type of decision that you would want to make as a franchise, but maybe because of the timing and the life cycle of a lot of the players that we're talking about who are now coming off of their rookie deals, and you're going to have to pay them, and it's going to get a lot more difficult. Maybe it's a move that the timing is being dictated to you rather than you deciding this is the exact point that you want to go in after having that patient approach.
Yeah. Well, let's just be clear. I think on the Carson Wentz deal, while I think it was arguably the best option of the options available to them, in a perfect world, this would probably not be the move, right? I mean,
Right.
let's just
Yeah.
be clear, right? I mean, if they had a top 10 draft pick, we wouldn't be having this conversation. They realized that, okay, we're at pick 21, and getting to the area of the draft they need to get, because I mean, you can't just go to like number 10 like the Chiefs did with Mahomes. You have to go 6, 7, 8 at best, to really be in control of the situation this year. There's just too many, teams that could go quarterback. So I think given all of that, this was perhaps their best option. I mean, unless you just wanted to take the, throw in the towel, for lack of a better word, and sign Fitzpatrick or someone of, in that mold, and just, if we go 8-8, we go 8-8, and we'll figure it out next year. But anyway, generally speaking, going even back to 2019, as you said, when Luck retired, what have they done since then? I mean, look, well, first of all, the Brissett contract, I don't think it was really, well, they never framed it as a commitment to him. Certainly not a long-term commitment. It was more of a down payment, I think, is how they saw it. They
Right.
had plenty of money. I think it was, what was that somewhat of a show of faith to the team as well, perhaps. I think when you can say to your team, hey, we're putting our money behind our words with this guy, so he's our guy. At least he was for the time being. Maybe that carries some weight with the team. So I don't think there was any long-term ill effect from doing it. I think that some of it was optics, and trying to do the right thing by him, and all that. So I give him credit for that. Fine. Um, and then so really there was only so much you could do at that point anyway, right? What are you going to do unless there's that Sam Bradford type of trade that the Eagles and Vikings made after the Bridgewater injury, which really I don't know how great that panned out anyway, but not for a first round pick.
Right.
so
Yeah.
so I mean, unless some kind of deal like that was available to you, I don't know that you really do anything more dramatic, especially when you have what you think is a competent quarterback at that time in Jacoby Brissett, who they wanted to learn more about. So anyhow, I think the real story starts in 2020 and their decision then to say, we'll go with Phillip Rivers and, as I've put it, kick the can down the road in terms of finding that quarterback. And I remember Frank Reich telling me that, he looked at every free agent quarterback, and the one guy I can't speak on is Tom Brady. I just don't ever think that was ever a real possibility. And probably
Yeah.
from Tom
Yeah.
Brady's standpoint too. Let's be honest. I mean,
Yeah.
I
He
don't know that
sounded
Tom
like he
Brady.
was locked in
Yeah,
on probably going to Tampa.
people
Yeah.
have asked me that, right? Like, well,
Right.
why did they sign Rivers over Brady? Well, I don't think they did. I just think that was never really a
Yeah.
conversation
Yeah.
on either side. I don't know that Jim Irsay is going to sign the all-time Patriots greatest player. How's that going to go over, right? And then is Tom Brady going to go play for the Colts? So I never really bought that. So anyway, back to Frank Reich. Of the available quarterbacks, free agency, the draft, etc. He felt that Phillip Rivers was their best option. It was that view, maybe jaded a little bit, or jaded's the wrong word, but skewed, I guess, because of his personal history there, maybe, probably. But I also don't hate it. I mean, I thought Phillip Rivers, for what he is, like he gave them everything you could have hoped, for what he was at 39 years old. So, but again, that came at the cost of kicking the can down the road. And you mentioned already the number 13 pick. They trade that for DeForest Buckner. Hard to really criticize it. I mean, the guy was transformative last season. So I just think really there has been I think it's fair to say there has been a reluctance to really go all in on a young quarterback prospect. The past two off seasons, they're clearly not doing it this year either. And what I think is the reason for that is they don't love their options maybe, or at least the ones that are within their reach. They're not getting Trevor Lawrence, right? So, but the ones that are realistic for them, I can only interpret that they have some doubts, and they think right now they're better served trying to resurrect Carson Wentz, whether you think that's good or bad, but that's the decision, and they think that could buy them some time, and if they're right, then I think it's really hard to argue. But if they're wrong, then they're kind of back to square one, and that's the problem.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I say the DeForest Buckner trade probably was the biggest signal that they were flipping the switch, because not only are you trading with a draft pick, you're giving him, I mean, I'm not sure if it's Aaron Donald money, but close to Aaron
Close,
Donald
yeah.
type of money, making him one of the highest paid players. Now it paid off, but it was almost a trade where he needed to be close to this level for it to pay off, for all that you gave up for it. So in some ways, you could say there was some good fortune on their side that things ended up working out as well as it did. Now, for this offseason, for the different options that were out there, obviously there's this tie between Frank Reich and Carson Wentz. So how much do you know about the other options that people are floating out there? I mean, you mentioned the trading up. It's kind of a non-starter, right? In this, there are probably 15 teams with better draft picks that everyone is talking about trading up to go get someone. So I don't think that was really an option. I don't think they could really be criticized for that move. But the other options that may have been out there, I mean, if you wanted to find someone for the short term, since they're still in this winning window, I mean, could Phillip Rivers have come back? Was this Phillip Rivers wanting to retire? Because, like you said, he played at a high enough level, clearly, to get them into the playoffs, a couple of plays away from winning that wild card game against the Buffalo Bills, who were a very good team. Was there any chance of that happening if either side pushed for it?
Yeah, so it was kind of a weird process the way that whole thing went. I'll start by saying this. I think Phillip Rivers coming back for one more year, even though, look, I can sit here and talk for 10 minutes about things that the guy doesn't do well, and that kind of hamstring you, right? I mean, first let's
Right.
start with he can't move. Okay. 2021, you got a quarterback who can't move. Like, that's
Yeah.
terrible. But he does clearly make up for it with a lot of the other things that he brings.
Well, he doesn't
And
take sacks, at least. He gets the ball out of
no,
his hand. So, yeah.
no, I mean, he is. I will tell you, having covered him now for the 1 year that I did, I learned a lot. And what I learned, I think, in particular, is it's not an exaggeration to say he is on the Peyton Manning level and that Drew Brees level when it comes to uh, the above the neck portion of the game. I don't think there's any question about it. And I saw it up close and personal, and I have a greater appreciation for his abilities there. Frank Craig said that, and he told us to expect that. He was right. There's no question. And I think that's how you play 17 seasons, with just a complete, utter lack of ability. How else could you pull that off? I'm not trying to make light of it, but it's a factor, right? I mean, come on.
Yeah.
So yeah, so to his credit, it's actually amazing what he's been able to do, both with the throwing motion, his lack of mobility, just all of the things that you would think would make him uh, not good at his job. He rises above them because of the things that he does well. He was really accurate, which is not something I expected. So, I mean, very, very good season. I feel like I was a little puzzled on how this was going to go initially. Um, when the season ended, Philip Rivers said, I'm going to take some time. I don't know what I want to do. But he had been saying in the weeks leading up to the playoffs, because the question kept coming up, I came away with the impression that he is strongly leaning toward playing in 2021. If you would have asked me the day after the wild card playoff game, what's Philip Rivers going to do? I would have said he's coming back. Now, I didn't know for a fact, but that would have been my bet. I think, of course, in their exit meetings, they had to kind of figure out, okay, where are we going to leave this? And the agreement between the team and Rivers was, look, let's just all go home and sleep on this for a month or so. Let's talk again in a few weeks. That's perfectly reasonable. And literally the next week, Philip Rivers announced his retirement. So I have been asked by a lot of people, did the Colts have a change of heart and tell them they didn't want him back? I don't think that happened. I mean, if you look around at their options, it's hard to argue that they would say that, because based on what, and I really think it was just Philip saying, you know what, I had a good run, and that's really what it was. I think his family was a big part of that. The Colts did. Now, for the record, the Colts did tell him, we're going to look at our options. They have to. They needed to do that. They needed to at least take a look at the landscape and see what was out there. I think at the end of that process, they were probably going to come back and say, we'd like to go one more round with Philip. But they did tell him that, and I think he's a big boy. He understood the reality there. He knows he's 39, but yeah, I don't know that they were going to do better. And I think them making this trade, which is not something that I'm sure they were dying to do, I think this tells you that, yeah, they probably would have just gone with another year of Philip Rivers. So we'll see. But yeah, I mean, they have not given themselves, or let me put it this way, outside of Jacob Eason, their 4th round pick last season, who I don't want to forget about, and I think has potential, they really haven't done anything about turning the page, and they're definitely, they're year to year, basically, almost at this point.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, what Wentz would bring, okay, let's say in comparison to Rivers, is maybe you can argue, at least physically, and what we saw in 2017, higher end play, right? So
Right.
If everything goes right, the same team they had last year that gets eliminated in the wild card round potentially is going to the conference championship or something like that. So we could say that he's younger. Now, do you know if they considered it all? And it doesn't sound like the timing was going to work out from the Jets side. But you know if they considered it all, looking at someone like Sam Darnold, who again it's younger, so you're not just getting a single season. You're getting someone you can exercise a 5th-year option. You can have a pretty cheap option for the next couple of years. Maybe I'm thinking of some other guys who may have been out there, like Marcus Mariota, maybe traded, again, reclamation type of project for someone who people are pretty excited about a couple of years into his career, but then things fell off. And then in the free agent market, not the most exciting options. Everyone loves Ryan Fitzpatrick. It seems like he's everyone's favorite player, but I don't think
like
he's every
3
front
games.
office's favorite player. he's every fan's favorite player to watch. Maybe not every coach's and every front office personnel's favorite player. So he's out there. Cam Newton potentially is out there. Andy Dalton may be out there. It depends on other guys who could also free up and could be out there. So there were definitely other options. Do you think any of those were seriously considered, or was it, you know what, this is our 1A option of Wentz now that Rivers is not here. Let's just lock this down and start moving forward at this point, and really nothing else is compelling enough to approach.
Yeah, well, I know that Darnold was discussed, and he should have been. I think he should have been. But I agree with what you also said, which is the timing was a little bit of an issue. It's kind of like, again, I agree. I think we're in agreement on trading up not really being a realistic option. But even if it was, you also have the reality that that's not going to happen right now. I mean, most likely. I mean, most of those trades tend to happen after free agency, after the first rush of free agency at best, if not at the draft, So how would you square all that just in terms of the timing? So I think Wentz was one of those things where the Wentz trade, it was kind of one of those things where it's like, all right, we have to, if we're going to act, we have to act with some conviction here, because you're making your decision now, I think, and now, there is also the reality that there may not have been any other teams in the mix, but that could change, and I think the longer he was out there, maybe Philadelphia would have found some other suitors. But to your question about other options, Darnold was discussed. I didn't get a great sense of what the evaluation was on him internally. I think clearly Wentz is held in much higher regard. I mean, just by virtue of Frank Reich's history, there's no question about that. And I mean, just watch them, right? I mean, I think the physical tools that you've seen Wentz exhibit, not that Darnold doesn't have tools, but I think we've seen them more consistently from Carson Wentz, I think, than Sam Darnold. Although I think Sam Darnold in the right situation, who knows? If you can get him away from Adam Gase, who knows?
It's happened for others, so yeah.
Exactly. I mean, it's amazing what happened to Ryan Tannehill when he got away from Adam Gase, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, I just think it was. I don't think they felt really strongly about any of those other options. They also, other than Darnold, most of those other options didn't come with the upside of Carson Wentz. I mean, say what you want. I mean, last year it was awful. I can't defend it. There's nothing there's no redeeming quality about anything he did last year, right? I mean, We all saw it. But we also saw that, between 2017 and 2019, there was a lot of good football. And I have no idea how this is going to go. I don't think the Colts really can promise you how it's going to go. But we know what he can be. So at least you have that, and I think with those other options, you don't have that for the most part. Sam Darnold maybe being the one possible exception. So I think you're getting at least a little bit of an added bonus. Yes, they're going a little bit year to year at this point, but none of those options that we've talked about, get you the potential of maybe getting off of this carousel finally, at least for a few years. They would love that. And, if the Colts come out of this with a quarterback that's viable, I don't know if he's going to be elite, but if they come out of this with a quarterback who's viable for a few years, I mean, just think about how much better they'll sleep at night, and I think that's compelling. I mean, right now, you're going year to year at quarterback. That's a tough way to live in the NFL. So, that potential payoff is really compelling for them.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting with Wentz. Like, I think we've seen this cycle almost on this offseason where when he was first benched in December, I remember writing something about, kind of doing this analysis and saying his projection going forward seems probably better than some people think. Because at that point in time, there was a lot of talk, maybe not serious talk, but at least talk of people on Twitter saying, hey, you're going to have to Osweiler this guy. You're going to have to send a second round pick with Carson Wentz. Then we flipped around to it's going to cost 2 first round picks to get him the opposite direction. And now we settled in here. So what do you think about the compensation? What do you think the reaction has been to the compensation? Because I haven't seen as much. Maybe I don't have as many Colts fans on my timeline, but I know Bears fans seemed extremely worried about the prospect of successfully trading for Carson Wentz in the neighborhood of multiple first round picks, or at least a first round pick. What do you think the reaction has been in Indianapolis? Or I guess was there enough desperation in Indianapolis, and it's such a huge bright light that they needed to fill, that maybe it was a better situation as far as a fan reaction is concerned?
So I think desperation is a key word here, because you mentioned the Bears fans, and I was kind of monitoring those conversations and are hearing a lot of those conversations, on my Twitter feed, because I was covering the story. And I did sense that the Bears fans in particular, I think because they know that their brass is in a little bit of a desperate situation, they did fear that. There's no question. And I think that's why I think desperation drives a lot of the bad moves around this league. Why do people reach in the draft, whatever that means, right? I think that has a different definition for everybody, right? But whatever. I don't love that term, but let's just use it for lack of a better word in this case. Why do people reach? A lot of times it's like, well, I really need a quarterback. He's probably not the guy, but I need a quarterback.
Right.
They do that. Why do people, make bad trades, right? A lot of times it's desperation. So Chris Ballard, I do believe, was willing to walk away. They kind of proved that. Well, prove is the wrong word, but they kind of demonstrated that with the Matt Stafford deal. Now, they were never really, I think, in position to make that deal. Nobody was, right? But it was just such a unique situation between the Rams and Lions, and we know what that was all about, right? But the Colts didn't really make a strong offer by comparison from everything that I've heard. I don't know the particulars, but I don't think they made a strong offer that was even in the stratosphere of what it took to get that deal done. And that's because that's about how strongly they felt about getting that deal done. They felt like, what, if we can get him for this, we'll take him. They felt he's on the downside of his career, et cetera. I'm getting a little off the subject, but my point is, this is Chris Ballard. And I think some Colts fans like this, and some are really frustrated with this, but this is who he is. He's very predictable in these matters, whether it's free agency, trade, whatever. He's going to set a price, or whatever his offer, or compensation, whatever it is. He's gonna have a figure in his head, assess the situation, come up with a figure or offer, and stick to it. That's what he does. And I think you'll notice oftentimes with free agency with the Colts, a lot of times what they do is they'll let guys go hit the market and let them come back home. They do that kind of thing. And that's exactly why, because I think sometimes the player has a number in his head, and Ballard in the front office are saying, you know what, no, this is kind of where we're at. And you kind of have to be a little bit of a jerk to some extent. I don't think that he does it like a jerk, but it may come off that way. I think you kind of have to be a little bit of a jerk and say, this is where I'm at, and it is what it is. So he's very consistent about the way he does business. And again, that has cost him, I assure you, some free agents, right? But he feels like I can lay my head down at night because I'm sticking to what has worked for me. And I think that's how this trade played out, is what I'm saying. And were they ever going to get railroaded on this? I didn't think so. I think the compensation isn't bad now for the Eagles. I do think the Eagles did fine. I thought Howie Roseman, to his credit, he probably make a great realtor. Could you imagine his Zillow ads?
Yeah.
It's like, hey, here's this 2-bedroom condo, $600,000. What do you think? It's like, great gym in the building. So I think that's kind of what this was. He was making a sales pitch, and no one was really buying it. But so you got a guy who was overselling, and then you have on the other side Chris Ballard, who's like, yeah, nah, so you had really two opposite forces there. And I would say they kind of met in the middle. I really think they met in the middle. The Colts knew that they were going to pay a premium on what he probably was really worth because he's a quarterback. That was their internal determination. All right, we get it. He's a quarterback. It's going to cost us more than another player of that level, who was at another position, if that makes sense. So I think they made their minds up about that internally, and I think that's why you saw them willing to go with the conditional first, I guess, a conditional second, but that can be a first. That though, I think was really good on their part, because I think you're worried about two things. You're worried about what if we can't salvage this guy, right? And then you're also not worried, but you're cognizant of he has had some injuries. So they did at least put some protection in there, and I think that was big because I think there was some real concern about those issues in the front office. So they got some protection for that. So I think both sides kind of got some of the things they wanted out of the deal.
Yeah. Now, do you have any read on the relationship there? It seems like a pretty strong relationship. Everyone's on the same page, from coach to GM to ownership. Now, it wouldn't be the first time in history, though, we've seen things not go the way as planned, and then the fingers come out, right? So that finger pointing comes out, and then someone's there. Do you think there's any chance as early as 3/4 of the way through this season, if things are not going well with Carson Wentz, I don't know who they'll have at backup. Will they bring Jacoby Brissett back at a number? I don't know. You mentioned Eason, who they have, who's a total question mark at this point. Could things get hot for Chris Ballard if this trade doesn't work out, even as early as the end of this year?
Hot in terms of like pressure, maybe.
Yes.
Hot in terms of, is his job in danger? I really don't think so.
Yeah. Okay.
Jim Irsay is already on record saying that he wants to extend Chris Ballard. His contract is up, I believe, next January or February. So he's got a little less than a year left on his contract. Jim Irsay has already gone on record saying that will change very soon. So he's going to get extended. And I will tell you, I actually kind of give Jim Irsay some credit here, because he gets the reputation for being, and look, he talks a lot, and he's eccentric. And look, I've never met an owner like him. All right. There isn't another owner like him, maybe. But I will tell you this. I have really kind of enjoyed watching this play out under Chris Ballard, because Jim Irsay is the opposite of Chris Ballard. He is the guy who's like, we're gonna win 3 of the next 4 Super Bowls. Like, how? What are you talking about? But
yeah.
But yet he has listened to Chris Ballard, and he has allowed Chris Ballard to be methodical, and take his time, and to just do it his way. He came in with a blueprint, and this is how I want to do it. And to Jim Irsay's credit, he's completely bought in. Even though he says the total opposite a lot of times when we talk to him, that's okay. He's not in there trying to blow up the blueprint. To his credit, he has completely handed the reins over. Look, he does not meddle as much as people think that he is all up in things. He really doesn't. He's a smart guy, and he was a general manager himself at one point, and under his father's ownership, and probably wasn't very good at it, I guess, in retrospect. And I'm sure he would admit. So he knows how hard the job is, and I think that gives him perspective. And he probably looks at Chris Ballard and thinks, yeah, he's so much better at this than I was. So yeah. He gets it. And so anyway, your question was more about Ballard and Reich, but I think it stems from the owner. And I think that's why I don't see a hot seat anytime in the next year or so in terms of their jobs being in jeopardy, because frankly, Jim Irsay thinks it's going really well. And I think that notion is very well founded. Given what they've had to deal with. And I hate saying it because it sounds like I'm making excuses for him, and I don't want to be that guy. I'm not a homer, but yeah, your Pro Bowl quarterback retires. less than 2 years ago, you really haven't had a great opportunity to fill it. I mean, how many teams out there are in quarterback purgatory? Just infinitely, right? I mean, we've seen that happen. It's hard. So, I think people get that, especially when it's not something you anticipated. It would be different if you had an older quarterback who, at some point was nearing retirement. And, if you don't draft a replacement at some point, that's on you. You're an idiot. That's not what happened here. This was very abrupt. So they never really had a chance to plan for this from a long-term perspective. And I think that's why, they're trying to deal with it as best they can. But no, I don't anticipate, to your question, any kind of a hot seat situation. I do think if you talk about pressure, though, I do think there's pressure from fans. This isn't Philly, granted, but I was talking to Philly radio the other day, and they asked me about that. Just how the outlook or the approach of people in the Midwest is different than Philly and New York. I said, well, yeah, that's true. But I said the one thing though, people everywhere have expectations, and at some point I said, look, call me in week 13, and if the Colts have won 3 games, I will happily tell you about the empty stadium, okay? Because so they may not, go out there and burn your jersey in the parking lot, but there's still expectations, and people hold teams accountable in different ways, So I think that's just something to remember, that they still have to, not that it's all about selling tickets. I mean, look, there's revenue sharing and teams make plenty of money, but at the end of the day, you're still accountable to your fan base. And I think there's, people here are thirsting for a team that's a competitor, or I don't want to use the word contender, but really they want to contend.
Yeah. I mean, it's weird when it comes to the quarterback. I mean, my only thinking was, I don't think that this move is as big of I guess in a way, as big of a deal in a way as some people may. I mean, let's face it, whoever trades for Sam Darnold, they may give up a 2nd-round pick. I don't know, maybe a 3rd-round pick. People are going to think that's a big deal when you're giving away like a 2nd-round pick. And the 2nd-round picks typically, they work out 50% of the time, and they don't work out the other 50% of the time. Even in this situation, they're wedded to Wentz for 2 years, basically, at like Teddy Bridgewater type of money.
Right.
And they gave away, there could be a 1st-round pick, but, like I said, 1st-round picks don't always hit. So, yeah, it would be good to not overreact too much to this. But one thing that I'm thinking about, though, with this offseason, you have the cap space. You have a year where the cap is a little bit lower. You want to build around the quarterback, obviously. You have the 21st pick. I mean, I'm kind of looking on the offensive side of the ball. I think everyone thinks the offensive line is doing fairly well. The backfield with Jonathan Taylor looks pretty good. But I'm not so sure about what else they have around him, quite honestly. T.Y. Hilton's a free agent. Michael Pittman looked pretty good, but he's a rookie. He's a 2nd-round pick. You never know if those things are going to work out. There's some other younger guys in the wide receiving core. I think Trey Burton is a free agent, I believe. Mo Alley Cox is a restricted free agent, so he'll probably be back. Well, do you think they need to focus on building that part out? Not only because it's building a great offense is a good way to win games, but to really invest in Carson Wentz. Now, you kind of want to solidify the investment that you've already made there.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think when I look at the offense, because I think the defense is very viable. There's some holes that we can talk about, but I mean, I think that they're pretty standard holes that every team has to deal with every year.
I mean, there's a couple guys maybe like Xavier Rhodes or someone that they may want to bring back, but he's older. He performed well. Like, why wouldn't he want to come back on a decent deal, right?
Right. I think there are ways to deal with those issues. I think on offense, though, when I like their offense. I think they have the potential to be really productive. But I do think, when you look at the skill positions, there's a little bit of you have to kind of project a lot, and I think that's where you can get in trouble. So you have to ask yourself, okay, are we overrating these guys? And are we expecting too much production out of these guys? I don't know what's going to happen with T.Y. Hilton. That's a really delicate situation. He's sort of a team icon, definitely, one of their franchise greats. He's 3rd in franchise history in receiving, behind Reggie Wayne and Marvin Harrison, or Marvin Harrison and Reggie Wayne, in that order. So, I mean, it's kind of a big deal, right? I mean, this guy, he's got a chance to end his career here. So that's a delicate thing. But is he the player he once was? No. But they also have a very young receiving core, so there's value there. I don't know how that's going to go. But I think that's why this is hard, because there is room there to add, I think, some juice, to bring a John Grudenism in here. I mean, there is some room there. Paris Campbell, I think the world of, but I mean, what do we know about Paris Campbell, in terms of whether he can stay healthy? If you're not asking that question, then you're not very realistic. He's basically missed most of his first 2 years. Michael Pittman, I like what I saw. What happens when he has to take the lead dog role? Can he do that? I don't know. We'll see. So I think that's going to be the question. The thing is, though, what's interesting is, I keep telling people this, whether they listen, I don't know, but just look at Chris Ballard's history. I think he's not really hard to predict, just because he's very consistent. He doesn't spend money on the perimeter players. I think he drafts those guys generally. The only thing they'll do is they'll sign like a mid-level tight end type guy, like Eric Ebron a couple years ago. Every year they seem to do that, because that's such a big staple for Frank Reich. He's got to have that sort of stretch tight end type guy. Trey Burton was that guy this year. Do they acquire Zach Ertz if he becomes available? Yeah, that could happen. I could see that. But I think there'll be some move at tight end, just because I think Frank Reich and his offense kind of demand that. But yeah, wide receiver is really interesting. Could I see the Colts going out and signing Chris Godwin for $20 million a year? I don't really see that. That's not a Chris Ballard move. I would be stunned, not because I don't think he's good, just because I don't think Chris Ballard will do that. It's just not something he's ever done. However, I think, as we've already said, they are kind of at a pivotal place, and the stakes are high for Carson Wentz. So that's why I wonder if there could be an out of character move for once. I do wonder that. We'll have to see. And I think there will be some cap casualties that we aren't yet aware of. So the marketplace could change, but they've got to consider that. They got to consider and ask themselves honestly whether they have enough, and whether they're projecting too much from the group that they have. They feel really strongly about it, but I think there are questions.
Yeah. I think T.Y. Hilton is really interesting because, obviously, clearly a great player. At the same time, you could point to the fact that he hasn't really produced without an Andrew Luck or someone like that there, although he had him there for most of the season. He's 32 years old. I think for Wentz, I know he's relied heavily upon the tight ends there, so I think you're right that that's going to be a focus. There's also a thought. Now, I don't know how it's tough to really gauge these things, that he was missing post 2017 and when he had some struggles after that, and then missing the last couple of years, someone who could stretch the field. So I don't know if T.Y. Hilton in this point of his career, is he really like the same field stretching sort of guy? Because I guess Torrey Smith was there before for Wentz, where he didn't utilize him heavily, but he was good there. Whenever Deshaun Jackson has been healthy, which has been rare, it seems like he's catching a 60-yard touchdown every single the handful of games that he's been able to play. So I'm kind of interested in that, whether T.Y. Hilton be re-signed, maybe Will Fuller or someone like that could be someone in free agency. But you're right that they have this cap space, but traditionally it's been used to extend guys, and they have Darius Leonard, Quentin Nelson, all these other guys left to extend. So I think that's the T.Y. Hilton is really the guy for me that I'm just not sold on. I don't know whether they're sold on him as being that type of player or not.
It's a great question, and I don't know the answer. I will say what's interesting to piggyback on what you just laid out about T.Y. Hilton is there's two observations. Number one, Phillip Rivers last year, I don't think, and to his credit to some extent, he didn't trust his deep ball nearly as often as he used to. And I give him credit because I think, he would throw those YOLO balls, for lack of a better word, in Los Angeles, and a lot of those got picked off. He didn't throw them this year. And T.Y. Hilton suffered as a result of that, because you got to throw him those 50-50 balls, and he's such a good route runner that he still creates some separation, for a 31-year-old guy, I much more than you might expect, so I give him a lot of credit. His route running is just impeccable. And I think that's what he's doing it with now, as opposed to the pure speed. He's still got some speed, but that diminishes. But yeah, he there's no question. I think with a different quarterback, he would have had more production last season, T.Y. Hilton. And then, so what have I done the last couple of days? I've been watching a lot of Carson Wentz film because I've never done that because I never had a reason to. And I got to tell you, I think I could see that pairing actually being productive because that kid can throw the ball. He can throw the ball. There's no question about it. That arm strength is impressive.
And he loves YOLO a little too much.
Yeah, a little too much. Exactly. Yeah. But he is not, he's not reluctant to take those shots. It's funny. That's one of the things that Jacoby Brissett was criticized for a lot 2 years ago. Here's this big, huge, strong guy with a rocket, on his shoulder, and he wouldn't take those shots. And it was really frustrating at times. But that would not be the case here. Look, he's got a lot of other issues, certainly Carson Wentz, but he's going to have presumably good protection. He's got a rocket for an arm. Those opportunities would be there, whether it's T.Y. Hilton or someone else. I do think that they can revive their deep game. Whether they can solve all the problems with Carson Wentz, I don't know, remains to be seen. But they can revive their deep ball game, I really believe, with Carson Wentz, because he's not reluctant to throw it. I just think that's going to be something that they can tap into. And when you got the play action going like they have, whether it's T.Y. Hilton, Will Fuller, or someone else, I think that opportunity is going to be there. So I'm really interested to see if they can do that because I think the odds are good.
Yeah. I mean, this is going to be a very, very intriguing offseason so you're going to be busy. You're going to be busy this offseason here. So
I've already been.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, unfortunately, you don't get a break here. Okay, so before I let you go, Steven, I'm gonna try to get a prediction out of you. What do you think? What is your prediction for the Colts this year? A, playoffs, and how confident would you be in that result? And B, can you get beyond what the team did last year? Can you get out of that wild card round?
So I think I really think that Carson Wentz will play at a more competent level under Frank Reich. Maybe I'm putting too much on Frank Reich, but I'm going to write a story about this at some point. I really believe he has gotten the most out of every quarterback who's played for him in his time with the Colts. Even Andrew Luck, who had his most efficient season, highest QBR of his career, highest completion percentage of his career.
Yeah, he almost became a different quarterback. It was amazing because he used to take a lot of sacks. He used to hold the ball a long time, kind of, who are we talking about here? Carson. It sounds a lot like Carson Wentz, right? And then he started getting the ball out of his hands quickly. The sack rate went way down. It was amazing because normally that's something you actually attribute a lot to the quarterback and you think doesn't change that much over time. But that almost flipped day and night with Andrew Luck.
Right, exactly. So these things are not a coincidence. I mean, just look at Phillip Rivers. From one season to the next, 2 years ago, 20 interceptions. This past season, he had 11 picks, higher completion percentage, much more efficient, just in all the efficiency rankings, right? So, even Jacoby Brissett. If you want to go from his 17 season to 19, there are upticks in the efficiency numbers. I don't think that's not a coincidence. That's three guys, three completely different quarterbacks, all of whom under Frank Reich had higher efficiency numbers. So I think if they can just get Carson to play more efficient football, they have enough on the defensive side for sure. They're going to put him in good spots, and the running game is enough to keep defenses honest. There's no reason they can't be a team that's in the playoffs. Whether they win the division, we'll see. I think they get in the playoffs, and then it becomes a question of where Carson is. Is he just that competent, efficient guy, or can he be something more? If he can be something more, now you can win a playoff game. But I'm not ready. I'm not prepared to say that. I'm more of the mindset like I think he can do enough they can get to the playoffs just because they're good enough. And all he's got to do is not get in the way and make some of those throws that I mentioned a little bit ago, just make some of those timely big throws that he's capable of making. If he can do that, they get in the playoffs as far as I'm concerned. The question is going to be, can he go to that next level? And again, I'm not going to predict that here. I wouldn't be stunned, but I'm not going to predict it yet. If he can, then I think they're a team that can make noise in the AFC.
Okay, well, you heard it here. Stephen Holder is guaranteeing the playoffs, a guarantee for the playoffs for the Colts. So all Colts fans can come back, and you can find him at Holder Stephen if you have any complaints later on this year if it doesn't happen. But anyway, Stephen, thank you so much for joining me. This has been great. Everyone out there, follow Stephen. Subscribe to The Athletic also. I'll have to say, I love everything that's going on at The Athletic, and it's really one of the best uses of money that I've spent here. And, of course, rate and review the pod, and we'll be talking to you again next week on whatever's going on with some new offseason news. Thanks, everybody.